This is the Digital Revenue Playbook Podcast, and I'm Todd Stauffer. In episode 2, I'm talking to Michael Grant, founder of Get Current Studio, which is a design, web development, and storytelling agency that helps BIPOC-owned, local, and nonprofit newsrooms leverage the power of Newspack. He's with us today to talk about the 3 things he suggests that publishers think about when they're planning to move to a new content management system like Newspack. Here's Michael. All right, Michael. So I imagine that in your line of business, what you do, what ends up happening a lot is a publisher comes to you and says, I don't like my website. I'm not happy, right? Now, I'm guessing that sometimes it's just because it's old, the tech is just not right. It's not working from a workflow point of view, but sometimes maybe they just don't know, right? They don't, the ad slots or the thing, or they had a consultant who used to help them with it and now doesn't. So when you're, hit up with that issue, you've got a publisher comes to you and says, Michael, I'm not happy with my website. How do I make the decision to change things out? Where do you start?
So I really like to start with understanding if it's going to be an incremental change to their website or their suite of products, or will it be an overhaul? And so there's a way to kind of determine if it'll be incremental or overhaul. So we can think incremental when their tech is actually pretty good. Maybe they've already moved to a CMS like Newspack that is jam-packed with features, has all the basics of what you would need to run a publishing business. If they're already in like pretty decent tech and they're just not sort of like hitting KPIs, not seeing audience growth, maybe the display of their homepage kind of sucks, got like 40 headlines above the fold. Maybe it's too much or too little. Maybe images are too big, too small. I look at that as incremental. We can essentially zero in on the right problems to solve within their current situation, and kind of bring whatever those issues are, kind of bring a solution to them, rectify them, try to figure out like, okay, what do we need to do differently here within the tech and the tools that we have? If their tech is just not performing, right? Like if the tech is just bad, like Google's not ranking them, the page is loading too slow, ad units aren't showing up like they should, they aren't able to change the page in any way. All of the, like when the technical debt becomes so high that they just can no longer sort of perform within it, that's when we need an overhaul. That's when we need to be like, yo, you need a new platform to do the work of carrying out your newsroom's mission and delivering news and information in a way that actually meets readers and that can be found on Google, that is searchable, and like all the things that Newtek would offer them. So those are kind of the first questions are, what kind of tech do you have, and do we need to do incremental updates to your services and your platform, or just do a full-on overhaul?
One of the things I think we hear talked about a lot on the back end, you and I are in some calls with other coaches where we're talking about, issues that different publishers are facing. And one is like the idea of the sunk costs that are already in some other, CMS or whatever. And it's like, those I think you have to get over pretty quickly, because if you're just not able to deliver what you need, then you've got to move on. You kind of have to fail fast with that particular CRM, right?
I couldn't agree with that assessment more, but it's so hard to start the conversation with sunk costs. I have to orient my clients to understand that what they're dealing with is a business decision that requires the right decision in order to move forward. And so sometimes folks are like really butthurt when we kind of start the conversation around sunk costs. Like, yeah, you paid for that and this is what you have, but you have to pay again, right? That's a hard reality. But when we kind of look at it as is this a incremental or is it overhaul? They can kind of better reach the right decision to guide their steps into like making the right decision if it is an overhaul, right? Like, but the reality is it is absolutely a sunk cost if they pay for something, 2 weeks ago or last year that cost them 10, 20, $30,000 and they have to go and spend again. It's just what it is.
Right. And then now the legitimate cost though is probably comes in the data extraction from the tool and getting it moved over, to the new system, which is probably one reason why a lot of the, the infrastructure discussion around publishing these days centers on WordPress, because even if you're not happy with something about your particular WordPress installation, once you're on WordPress, it's a lot easier to migrate between the systems. But I mean, from your experience, how big of a deal is migration and how does it factor into the decision making for the publisher?
Certainly. So as a studio, we actually stay far and clear away from that side of the cumbersome process of moving a news organization from one platform to the other. But thankfully, there are vendors who support publishers or clients and will do that work for you. And it is expensive and it's technical and it can be messy. So again, like having the right vendor in place that you can rely on. And we have a list of those who would recommend, including Newspack, or if they want to go self-hosted, maybe like a Kinsta. We recommend working with folks who can handle that migration. But essentially, that's another learning that has to happen, is to really inform the client of the state of affairs when it comes to how bad their previous CMS is, depending on how dated it was or how badly or poorly structured it was. And being able to bring in a professional team who can successfully migrate those things into bring them to a place where, now they can actually get business done and, see through business objectives because their tech is in place and everything's organized the way it should be.
Well, so before we get off of your number one of your three things, right? The other thing I was thinking about was incremental. Even once you've gone to Newspack, right, you may still have incremental changes that need to be made. A lot of people figure, I've done it, I've made the transition, I'm there, I'm done. And I think that it's important to note that whatever the vendor is that you're moving to, Ghost, IndieGraph, Newspack, or something self-hosted, or a consultant, it's like that's the first step, because you've got a lot of user interface work to do. You've got a lot of product design work to do after that, and in a way, that's kind of where you step in, right?
Absolutely. So most clients aren't enthusiastic about the idea that when we launch newsrooms into Newspack, for example, it's mostly their MVP. But the reason why is because there's usually a pretty tight timeline that we want to get these sites launched on. We can't hit every business need and business goal, on the first time around. But we want to make sure that we're launching, our customers and our clients into an experience that has at least the minimum viable product going on for it. So the real work comes, I think, in that part of the work we do with them that becomes incremental. Okay, so now that you're in this place of stability, now we can really zoom in and figure out, okay, how will you create a membership program that is well thought and delivers value? How are we going to stand up your newsletter products to, really convey a value proposition that feels important to your audience? What segments of your audience are we going to focus on to build products around? All of those things are the actions that we can take after the tech is in place and we have all the tools to execute delivering those new experiences. So that's where the real work begins, and usually that's where we end up staying on as a studio post-launch to help figure those things out.
Okay. And so I'm guessing that, and for those folks who don't realize, what I'm asking everybody who comes on the show to do is to give me the three things. What are like the three things you'd want to communicate to a potential partner or somebody you're going to work with or whatever, just the advice that you need to impart. So your number two is the one things that newsrooms can be best at. I imagine once you have made the decision about what you're going to do about your tech, then the next thing is sort of product wise, what are you best at and how do you design for the user around that? So talk to me about your number two here.
Yeah, so this can be a bit of a challenge sometimes because oftentimes we'll have clients or customers who who do have products. They have like a few things that they're doing. They may have a ton of things that they're doing, right? And so what we try to figure out is what what is the low hanging fruit? What what are you doing that can be done better immediately, and how can we hit that, right? Like, so I'll try to like identify those things right away and stand them up as quickly as possible. But one of the key questions is what can you be best at delivering? Is it a newsletter experience? Is it the fact that you can respond most quickly to specific news for a specific community? Is it that you're providing great detail through these three very experienced journalists who have a lot to say on a specific topic? Like I find that most of the clients that I work with, specifically from like legacy media, haven't figured out outside of their value of providing news and information to a specific community, like the distinguisher that they really need to continue to be of value to a community, right? So that's where I think some of the real work begins, is identifying and being realistic about what other products that you have that you can be the best at delivering. How can you differentiate your product from the publisher down the street? If you all are reporting on the same subjects, what makes yours better than theirs? Why is it going to be more engaging to the audience that you're trying to appeal to? Coming from you and not the person down the street. So that's kind of a honest and frank conversation about what value we're really delivering, or the customers really delivering to their customers and readers. And sometimes we just kind of continue to have them do whatever they're doing. But where I'm looking for impact with the customer is to truly identify what that differentiator is, and lean into it when it comes to how we want to develop and display that particular product or that different value proposition.
So probably, I mean, what could a differentiator be in this case? I mean, can you think of an example of a client where it's like, and part two of that question is, did they know it or did you all discover it together that no, we're going to actually focus, the homepage, or we're going to focus part of the user experience on this website on this strength of yours?
Yeah, I'll give you two great examples from BIPOC-owned community publishers. So I had a wonderful opportunity to interview the business community for the Atlanta Voice. We interviewed like 18 people from their business community, and they already had the idea to appeal to this community, and they were trying to figure out how they're going to create products to meet their needs. So what we found out was that the community didn't feel well represented in mainstream media. They're looking for community. They're looking to understand more about the businesses around them, maybe learn from them, and they didn't have like a central place in order to like get that very intentional, tailored news and information about stories that would help them grow or become better at what they do, or help them evolve, or give them a good idea of the landscape of business for Black businesses in Atlanta. So like by having that information, you're already armed with like what the need is, and so now you can start to come up with very focused products that speak to those audience needs. And so that's an example of what it looks like to like identify and find that differentiator is by speaking to the audience direct and you know and asking, and then starting to figure out how you want to respond to that. Another good example is the Houston Defender, another one of our clients that's regular with us. They identified a number of segments of their audience, and these segments obviously are members of their community. But they started coming up with specific kinds of topics that they would be interested in. So they wanted to center one group of content on their site, you know, on Black women in Houston, and so they just called it Black Women. And so it's a no-brainer. If you're a Black woman, you see a headline, you know, that is for you, literally as an audience member, and you see a label that says Black women. These are specific segments of their audience that they are intentionally developing content for, and you know, packaging this content on their site with also like lots of intention to, you know, sort of entice and meet that audience and have them feel recognized when they see it, right? So so there's a big emphasis on visuals there and just packaging.
You know, and the reason that was interesting to me, because, you know, with your number two here, with the one thing that newsrooms can be best at, you know, I think another way to even think about that, I was just doing a session with a very much a startup, one, you know, been around for like a year, and one of their major problems is they don't have the resources to do all the reporting they want to do, which is true of probably, you know, pretty much everybody's not the New York Times, I guess, you know. So it's like, then the question becomes, how do you find your niche, or how do you, you know, get closer to what you're trying to do? And I think that you don't always think about it in a design sense, but it's like the top of your site, or what people see a lot going on with your site, should probably be what you're about. Like, what's the mission of your publication? What is the through line? You may do some breaking news, or you may do, you know, people features or arts features or whatever that, you know, but even those hopefully fit to mission. But it's like, how do you communicate your mission, you know, through the site? And I mean, do you ever sit and tell a client, you know what, you've got these little breaking headlines at the top, and that's not what you need there? Or do you ever talk about that kind of a thing?
Sure, yeah. So good example, Injustice Watch. They're an investigative outfit in Chicago. They specifically cover the court system in Cook County and branch out into, you know, the state. Um, and you know, they're called Injustice Watch, and you may not know, you know, off the cuff what Injustice Watch might mean. You know, as an audience member or a reader coming to their site, you're just presented, if you're a unique audience member, with a logo that says Injustice Watch and some really delicious journalism that they've done. So one of their design challenges was, you know, how do we communicate our, um, you know, our mission? How do we communicate the value that we offer, what people will be able to provide? And so they were one of those cases, because of their brand title, that, you know, you kind of really needed to have that, you know, that tagline paired closely with the logo, just so that people make the connection that you need to make in that instance that they're looking at your story from an organization that they may not have engaged with before. But it's also a great reinforcer, for example, for all the folks who are engaging to, let's not forget, we're here because we're, you know, we're very passionate about, you know, covering this work, because it's not, you know, done, you know, enough and at scale, you know, where they are. So those are really important conversations to have about what it looks like to engage an audience who may be new to you, or to reinforce the brand, and like to make sure that that reinforcement is made throughout the product experience, whether it's the header on the homepage when you visit it on desktop, or, you know, what you're seeing at mobile.
Maybe you know, that conversation actually kind of segues into your number three here. Your number three is design is informed by the problem that we want to solve. So why is that the, you know, the third thing that you want people to think about when they're when they're thinking about their web presence or other digital products?
Yeah, I think there's this misconception about design that you can just hand things off to a designer and they'll just make them beautiful, and the world will be a better place. And design is very much as important as the business case behind the products. Well, design is really about like how we're going to solve a problem, and then come the visuals, and then comes like the product or the tool or the display that gets us to having folks find our solution set to be beneficial or well enjoyed. So you know we want to think about the solutions first, like what is the problem, and then like what solutions can we imagine that will address that challenge, address that problem, and having that set of ideas for what it looks like to address a challenge or a problem really helps a designer come up with better ideas around what that designed experience would become or should present as, right? So we can shoot from the hip and like come up with pretty display and ways to look at things all day, but if it's not generating the conversions you're looking for, actually solving the problem that you had, like all that design and attention to detail on random miscellaneous things is all for naught. It's just wasted time playing with pixels as opposed to, actually addressing a challenge and doing it in such a way that it's delivering value.
As you're talking, one of the things, or a couple of things I think about are how important good design can be from a revenue standpoint for a publisher, because you need effective calls to action. You need ad slots in the right places if you're selling advertising. You need, and I know that you see a lot of this because you work with a lot of Bloom Lab and Word and Black publishers. Uh, Sponsored content, like really well delivered, designed, integrated sponsored content, can be a real game changer for local publishers. You want it done right. You want it marked. You want it, clear to the reader so that it's a service to the reader. But that's a design challenge as much as it is almost anything else. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. So you can have the assets, and it can be, you can have a program that you're going to run. There can be like specific steps that you take to deploy a program. But if it all looks like confetti on a website, or the experience is like very hard to understand, or maybe there's a bunch of other noise that gets in the way of people engaging with these things, then the product ends up becoming a failure. And so that's where design can really help elevate the experience. So you can run the program, but every part of the program feels like, or gives the audience, a sense of direction. They understand what they're reading. They understand the flow of information. They're able to feel like they maybe want to return because it was an enjoyable experience. And so in those situations that we find ourselves in as a studio, there's really like three clients. There is the publisher themselves, who want to have a good or create a good experience for their client and audience. And then again, there's the client that they've sold their branded content to. They also want to see a great experience, and then the audience. They're the most honest customer of them all. They'll just either engage or go away. So we want to make sure that whatever we're designing for in terms of an experience can engage them ultimately, and that would make everyone happy.
All right, I like it. So here's, my major takeaway, and then I want you to give one if it's different from this one. But my major takeaway is, a lot of people in the ecosystem now are going to be moving to Newspack, or have moved to Newspack, or they've done something very similar to that, some sort of a WordPress solution, right? the takeaway is that's the first step, not the end, right? There's a lot of other thinking. And I think that all three of your things really speak to those steps that happen after you have the tech in place, or once you made the decision that you're going to overhaul versus increment. Now it's time to do the real work, right? Which is look into how are you going to communicate your mission, and how can you design this so that it really serves the reader and serves your revenue needs at the same time. So what are the takeaways that I missed there?
No, that's solid. I mean, the real work begins post launch, and um, double your budgets, uh, or decide to figure out how you want to incrementally improve your product lineup, and do it in such a way. My recommendation is do it in such a way where you're consistently improving the experience over time. We know that it's really hard, for example, for news editorial teams to like adopt new products. And it takes them some repetition and being able to, start to meet the demands of a new product requirement that they have to be a part of. So that takes a little time. Users also have to adapt to the new product experience that you are giving them. Some folks will love it, some will hate it, but after repetition, they will come along and maybe even enjoy the ride after a while. So that incremental goes a really long way if you are, slowly but surely creating more value in that, in how folks are experiencing a product.
I'm going to leave your URL up here for a second, because I think it's worth saying that one way to solve the problem is to hire a professional like yourself who comes in and helps with the big work. And then people need to have digital editors, or newsletter and web editors, or people on the ground who are fulfilling these things. But I think sometimes you think, I'll find a techie person and they'll do it all. And maybe it could make sense to get some solid consulting that starts in the industry and helps people, get to best practices quickly with these tools like WordPress and Newspack, and then get a staff member who day to day, fulfills that. So thank you for being here, Michael. I appreciate it. I'm going to throw up your LinkedIn as well. If somebody needs to get a hold of you that way, connect up. All right, Michael. So thank you for being here today. And I know I'm going to see you soon.
Todd, thanks so much for having me.